Welcome to the What's Your Revolution show, a show for men and the people who love them. We'll discuss how men can find and embrace the revolution within themselves, where people can find and embrace the revolution within themselves. I am your host, Dr. Charles Corprew. What's good, revolutionaries? It feels like it's been a little while. Life has been moving. Spring has sprung. We've been doing our things. It's sundress and seersucker season. We are out here looking good, folks. Hopefully you have a chance to make sure that summer tan is going to get you right. Thank you to my folks. I was in New Orleans a couple of weeks ago for Jazz Fest. And as you know, on this show, I talk about my love of New Orleans, and I am a New Orleanian through and through. Thank you for the wonderful time, the wonderful opportunity to be with friends and family and to revel in the space. We are coming out of COVID. We have the ability to find community, as I talk about so much in this space. What does that look like for you, revolutionaries? Finding and spending time with your community, reveling, allowing them to love on you and being in space. And spring is also a time of renewal. And I'm hoping that you are finding ways to have self-care, to learn more about yourself, to figure out what that looks like in the mirror and outside, and how are you being you? How are you growing? I know for me, as I begin to the opportunistic time of year for me is when I get to celebrate my birthday. And we don't talk about how old I am anymore, but I am enjoying this time in my life and really exploring who I am, what I like to do, who I want to be with, who I want to spend time with. And part of that is also exploring my sexuality, right? How does that feel? What does good sex feel like? And who do I want to have sex with? And for long periods of time. I'm almost embarrassed to say that, but there's a vulnerability about sexuality and sex, and I think it's time that we have that conversation here on our show as we grow and think about being sexual beings in the world. That's who we are. And it's funny, people always say when I walk into the room, Charles Corprew, you exude sex. And I'm always trying to figure out what does that mean, that I exude sex? And I guess I've been a person who've loved sex since I was a child. It's been a part of me. And so what does healthy sex at this age look like? And how do I be the healthiest version of myself with my partners or partner? Let me say that. So I wanted to have this conversation, a healthy sex and a healthy relationship. And I began to do some research, and it's interesting that Google will tell you who are the most prominent people in the field and who are doing amazing things. And I wanted to bring on Dr. Sonjia, a best-selling author of Sex in South Beach. She is associate professor of medicine at the University of Miami. And this was the person that I was like, I want to have this woman on my show. And we had an interesting conversation when we were first talking. And I was like, wow, like I was taken back. I was like, I almost wanted to fly down to Miami, like, and meet her in person. Cause I was like, she is a force to be reckoned with. So Dr. Sonjia, thank you for coming on the What's Your Revolution show. How are you? And that is a beautiful, beautiful smile that you have. How are you doing?
I'm doing very, very well. Thank you for having me here, Dr. Corprew. It's such a pleasure to be here. You're doing such amazing work, and I really, really appreciate the opportunity to have a little discussion with you and your audience, because you have such a great audience, and the work that you're doing to really help not only Black men or men in general, men of all colors and from all walks of life, but also the people that love them like me.
Yes. And we thank you. Thank you. Keep loving on us. Keep beautiful sisters like you. Please keep loving on us. Thank you.
So I'm really, really, really excited to be part of your conversation today. Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. No worries. We're going to get this question out of the way. It's my favorite question in the world. Dr. Sonjia, what's your revolution?
I help people have better sex. It doesn't seem at first, on the first time you hear it, it doesn't seem so revolutionary. People have been having sex since the beginning of time, but have they been having the sex that they want to have? Have they been having what I would call high quality, good sex? And people are like, what's good sex? And I'm like, okay, first of all, orgasms weren't involved. Probably wasn't so great. But beyond that, what really is good sex. And I think that really changes over our lifespan. When you were talking about your love of sex since you were a child, I think, every 13-year-old boy, any sex is good sex, right? Or 18-year-old, or however you were when you started experimenting. And I think that's pretty much what most of us are doing our whole lives, experimenting. And so I was like, let's stop that. Let's just stop the trial and error show, and let's try to get educated about this topic and have real meaningful conversations that lead to better relationships, not only with each other, but with ourselves. Let's end this sexual guilt. Let's stop feeling bad about our desires, and let's talk about them and open them up. And I think that when we are brave enough to do that, we might be lucky enough to find someone else who wants the same things that we want.
Yes. That is a wonderful revolution. And it's interesting that you say that. Good sex. And I'm going to ask you that question a little in a little bit, like what is good sex and how do we get there? But it's interesting because I was reading some articles and doing some research for our conversation. And one of the articles I read, I want to say it was a New York Times article, is that people are actually having less sex these days. And I want to ask this why, like from a researcher standpoint, why are people having less sex? Because I want to have, out there, I want to have more sex, right? I remember the younger version of me. I'm like, I want to have more sex. Why are people having less sex? What's the barrier? What's hampering people from having sex these days?
I think it's the same reason why people aren't having more conversations. We don't call each other on the phone anymore. We've become a completely virtual society. And if you can get all of what you perceive or you think are your sexual needs, if you can get those met without meeting someone in real life, I would call that limiting your sex life. But some people are like, all my needs are met and I don't have to leave the house. And so I think quite a few things are behind that. There's a lot of addiction to porn going on. A lot of people, there's now, I call it PID or PIED, porn-induced erectile dysfunction. Erectile dysfunction is happening at younger and younger ages, and a lot of it has to do with our obsession with pornography and in releasing our sexual energy through pornography rather than by relating to another human being. Wow. And thinking about that, and here's the nerd in me. Here's two doctors talking about porn and the neuroscience of this, right? And the endorphins and dopamine levels from watching porn increase, and there's no way that you're gonna, like, you got to be having like mind-blowing sex to create the amount of dopamine and endorphins that are secreted by watching porn. And if you're not, right, having that same type of I call it circus sex, where circuit sets and all of the things. These are professionals, right? These are professionals. It's like playing in the NBA, right? It's playing in the NFL. Like, most people are not playing in the NBA. It's like 1%. So thinking that you're going to have this type of sex and to have that level of dopamine and endorphin rush, it creates this level of like, wait, this doesn't feel like, or it doesn't feel like that, because your erection or your stimulation or this vaginal doesn't feel the same. It's not the same. And so you're like, wait, no, I'm just not going to do it. And that's crazy. Like that porn has, and I remember growing up, Doc, and not having easy access to porn. Absolutely. Magazines even were hard to get, and they were behind, a black file folder or something, so you couldn't even see the images if you went into the store. But it is a really big problem. People blur the lines. They forget that these are people being paid to do a job. They're professional actors. One of the things I love to point out about pornography is all of the noises that people make. Not everyone wants to make noises during sex. A lot of people, when they're experiencing sexual satisfaction, they're actually silent because they're so into their head and or into their body and enjoying it. And you might hear some heavy breathing, but even the noises that you hear in a pornography film, those are scientifically proven to ignite desire. So directors are saying, say this, moan this way, do it at this, at this level, because they know the science behind what it takes to induce those feelings of desire. So when we blur the lines, like, I want that. And one of the crudest examples that I can give you, I'm going to use some very decent language, but to remind everybody listening that pornography is a paid production with professional actors. I have been a sexologist for over 20 years. I have never once met a woman who said, you know what I really want? I want to get down on my knees and I want to have like 5 guys ejaculate in my face. Yeah, that's what I want. Never heard it. And it's so weird because that scene has been performed in adult films over and over again.
Over and over again, yes.
And I think most people listening, I don't think we know someone like that.
Wow. Yes. That is, the imagery of that is can be quite shocking, but it is there. The degradation of women that we do see on porn, and how young men or even older men see that. May, and I'll say may, because we're both scientists, and it's not an exact thing, but may have a tremendous impact on how men then interact with the people who love them or the people that they're interacting with. And the interesting thing, I wanted just to dive down a little bit further, because, again, vulnerable, like you talked about the scientific points or the scientific knowledge of the sound, right? And I know that, again, I've been caught up in the sound, right? The sexual sound. Well, this doesn't sound like, and I spent, I spent some time in my life watching pornography, and I have then been off of it for a long time. Because I knew of the impact that it was going to have on my life. I could see the physical and mental aspect that it was going to have on my life. But I have been caught up with the sound. This doesn't sound like, I can't hear, like, it's really, really quiet in here. There's a problem. Hey, Houston, there's a problem. What's going on? And to know that, right, to understand that there's a science behind this, and to create a heightened level of arousal. We think about this, that people, right, they want you to come back time and time again, right? If you think about this from again, going back to endorphins and dopamine, why do you go back to McDonald's, right? Why do you want McDonald's fries, right? I love McDonald's fries because there's something in the ingredient that neuroscience says, I want McDonald's fries and nothing else. Porn, again, from what I'm hearing, will take you back. I want that same fry again and again, until the dopamine and endorphin rush is lessened, and then you go looking for more, right? Greater levels of porn, greater, more outrageous. That's so interesting. I didn't think this conversation was going to go there that quickly, but thank you.
I remember I wanted to make one point about the sounds. I remember explaining this. I was giving a seminar somewhere, and that came up for some reason, and a man said, you know what? That must be why I love women's tennis. I never knew it. He's like, because I hate tennis. I won't watch men's tennis, but every time women's tennis is on, I'm like, he's like, but I think a lot of those sounds that women are making when they're playing tennis, they must remind me of when I'm watching porn. He's like, because it's one of those things. So he was able to make that connection and see how it was impacting his own choices of what he was viewing. So It's definitely interesting. Yeah.
It is. You think about Pavlov's theory of classical conditioning, and how, right, we can bring the grunts of women's tennis. Like, wait a minute, this sounds like a sexual experience. Wow, Doc. There's so much that we're going to talk about today, but I appreciate this. But I want to roll it back, because this question of sexologist and sex expert, I know my listeners want to know, what is a sexologist, and what was your journey to get there? Like, literally, like, there's more. Like, wait a minute, you're having a sexologist on the show? Like, what is that? Like, so if you could we can define our terms here. What is a sexologist, and what was your journey to get there? Why?
Why? So I became a sexologist because I'm a Black heterosexual cisgender woman in America. And I was told many times during my life, I was two things. I was going to become diabetic, as 1 in 4 Black women do develop diabetes in their lifetimes, even though it's completely preventable. And I was going to contract HIV. Because at the time, heterosexual Black women, this was, and it still is, I'm in Florida at the University of Miami, and HIV is still a leading cause of death for Black people between the ages of 20 and 45 here, or excuse me, 20 and 54 here in Florida. And when I say leading, like the 5th and 6th leading cause of death, depending on your age group, even though there's medications to prevent HIV before and after you put yourself at risk. So initially, when I went to school, when I went to graduate school, I don't know if you know who Paul Robeson is or if your listeners do,
yes,
but
I do.
I actually wanted to be like Coco from Fame. So I grew up wanting to go to New York for any reason at all, but I'm not talented in the fine arts. I was very, very good in school. So I went to Columbia University as a reason to go to New York. When I got there, I actually thought I was going to go into politics. And then I realized I did not want to, I did not want to go into politics. I did not feel I was going to be able to make the world a better place because of the influence of money and the lobbying situation that is still going on today. And I didn't want to put my whole life out on Front Street if I wasn't going to be able to make meaningful changes. And at the time, it just seemed like you weren't going to be able to make meaningful changes in the political arena. And again, Black women were dying from HIV, and I started a research project, and I became an expert in HIV. I still am. Today, I run the largest street-based HIV clinic in Miami-Dade County. However, after working on sex problems for a few years, I was still in graduate school. And most of my colleagues were older than me, the doctors, the nurses, the patients, and all of my patients told me how they contracted HIV. And I was like, man, those are some horrible sexual relationships. Like they weren't even having orgasms. And I thought, my God, if I'm going to contract HIV, I'm definitely it needs to be like a multi-climatic session if it's going to if it's going to lead to a potentially fatal diagnosis. So what I did was I started exploring how can we help people have better sexual relationships. And perhaps if we were able to have better, more fulfilling sexual relationships, then we would reduce HIV, we could reduce divorce, we could reduce broken families, we could reduce all of the problems that are really prevalent. I'm very concerned with minority communities, and no one needs more help in those situations than Black and brown communities. And so I started exploring, and fortunately, I don't know if you and your guests know who Dr. Ruth is, but she was Dr. Ruth Ginsburg was like the first sexologist in the United States. She had a heavy German accent. She still is alive in New York City in her 90s. She's one of my mentors. She went to Columbia. So I was there as I was exploring this, and there was no sex education or anything sort of concentration or focus. But I said, I want to help people have better sex. I want more sexual pleasure. So all of my research is most of my funded research is still on sex problems. And I have a business on the side that focuses on sex pleasure. What we do is we cultivate all natural experiences and products, services that help people evolve their sexual relationship with themselves or with their partners. And we do it in the context that most people do want to end up in a committed monogamish type of relationship. But
monogamous-ish.
Yes, I have a term I've coined, married-ish. Like most of us want to end up in a married-ish type situation.
Okay.
However, we know from the divorce rates and just from the ways that people evolve in different directions sometimes that the traditional structure of marriage isn't really a great fit for most people. And if you have a second, we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, but we got time. Go ahead.
I wanted to talk about sex because I felt I didn't know anything about sex. I went to Catholic school for 12 years. I remember asking my biology teacher, what does it mean when you get wet? Everyone's telling me about this wet thing. And I was the last American virgin. And I was like, I don't know what it means. And she said, you'll find out when you're ready. And I was not a good answer. So I learned everything.
Wait, what is this? Wait, hold on. Like, what?
Yeah, I want to know what being wet is before I get wet, And so I felt there was a better way. Fortunately, I have had some very, very, very responsible gentlemen as my partners in life. And so I had some very caring boyfriends who taught me things and taught me how to have sex and taught me about sexual pleasure. But it could have gone either way. They could have said, hey, if I put my foot up your anus, this is what sex is. And I wouldn't know any different. I mean, so I felt sex education, and especially sex education beyond just sexual risk education, sexual pleasure education was just sorely lacking in the United States. And so for the past 20 years, I've been trying to figure out how to get it out there, working on it still. I wrote a book, I've written a sex column, but it's still one of those taboo subjects where it's easier for us to talk about constipation than a prolonged period of abstinence not by choice. Which most people who enter these prolonged periods of abstinence is not by choice.
Not by choice, no.
And we don't discuss that, hey, now I've got a bitchy attitude because I haven't had an orgasm in a year. We don't talk about the physiological factors that go into all of this. So I felt someone needed to be there let's talk about the biological experience, what happens during the sexual response cycle. Let's talk about, as you've already been discussing so far, the psychological processes that happen, what happens when our brain is sexually excited. I love to say, the most important sexual organ is the one between our ears.
Mm-hmm.
And so when your brain is on fire and it's aligned with what your body wants, then that can be some really, really, really good sex. Yes. And I think that these are the important discussions. I've been working in HIV since, forever, it feels like, but since the 90s, I guess. And I have never had a patient say, I was having the best sex of my life when I got HIV. And back in the 90s, I said this. I said, let me tell you, when I die, people are going to be like, I had the best sex of my life when I went out. I mean, and I think that's what we should be having. Magic Johnson doesn't know how he got HIV. Charlie Sheen doesn't know how he got HIV. I'm like, shouldn't you kind of remember that?
Yeah. That's this. There's so much, Doc, that you just gave us. Like so much. No. It is so good. It's such good fodder. But what I heard is that the revolution in what you're trying to do is around creating good sex, because if we're having good sex, what does it lead to, right? Hopefully, if you're having good sex, right, you can be married-ish, right? Because as I think about this age of this middle age of mine, and attempting and trying and receiving and all the time, like, what is good sex? What is going to make me stay home? And I think what I heard, right, and that's what the thing. What's going to make me stay home? And have communication with my partner and asking her, like, what do you like? Are we in a good place? Do we want to bring somebody else into this if we've had that type of communication? But for me, right, and anyone who knows Charles Corprew, the younger versions of Charles Corprew, right, what's going to make Charles Corprew stay home? And as we said earlier in this discussion, right, I've been a sexual being since I can remember. Like, it was like almost that was a part. I guess that's the Taurian in me. If we look at the cosmic charts, right, Taurians are very sexual people, and so it's just been a part of me. And to really just think about what that looks like is that the revolution in itself is around finding and figuring out, and if I'm correct, is consistently having good sex, because hopefully it's going to keep you home, and keeping you home theoretically is probably going to keep you safe. Is that what I heard?
Yes, yes. You're definitely along the same lines. I get my own self confused, but yes, what is good sex? It's not just about having good sex, but having conversations about good sex and evolving our sexual relationship. Because Charles, if you and I had gotten together when we were 18, I might want to try something new, right? It's like, it's been a couple of years. So, I'm not 18 anymore. My friend did this in a taxi. My other friend did this. My other friend did this. I've been hearing about some things. I've been watching some TV. I might want to try something new. And where's the safe space where I can talk about this with my partner without offending my partner, without anyone making some sort of accusation, oh, you want this, because that's what we tend to do as adults. We tend to trivialize sex. Like, we make it in America. I find it's very dichotomous. It's either rape. It's the only way we hear about it as adults is rape or porn. I'm like, where do you hear about the ice cream with the cherry on top? because sex is supposed to be good. But
Sex
if
is
you hear
supposed to
about
be
it
great.
On the news, have you ever heard anyone say on the news, you know what, we were just having really, really amazing intimate relationships. And I decided that I couldn't work here anymore because it was a workplace relationship and I wanted to evolve it. No, you hear about rape, porn, sexual misconduct. There's no space that I can think of, a really large public space, which is what I'm trying to create, where we can evolve this, where we can take a class. I give classes at the World Erotic Art Museum, and they're wonderful and they're attended by really smart adults who are looking to evolve their sensual relationship or their own sexual experiences as they look forward to their next relationship. And I think, you talked about bringing a person in. Sometimes it's like, can we bring an altoid in? Can we just chop up some ice cubes and put a bucket of ice next to the bed, Can we just do, it doesn't have to be as much as, okay, I'm going to put a wig on tonight and, I'm going to be Beyonce.
I'm going to be somebody else. Yeah, exactly. And that's it. And so I'm going to ask this question because it's leading into this, right? Like, what is great sex? Right? How is there a definition? Is there a universal definition? And I know the answer to this, but I want my listeners, right? I want to hear what Dr. Sonjia has to say to this. Right? What is great sex, and can I have great sex tonight?
Good question. That's the first thing I want to say. I do think great sex is different for everyone. If you want a general definition, I would say very similar. Something that makes you want to do it again. Right?
Yes.
And can you have it tonight? That depends. Do you know this person? If it's someone who you've never met before, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? You might want to swing from the chandeliers, and they got a bad back. I don't know. And you might, there's a lot of rules. I like to use little things for people to remember. I've had a lot of clients, female clients who are frustrated because a man won't perform oral sex. And I'm like, look, not good enough for your lips, not good enough for your dick. I mean, that's, you got to remember. And I think that you need to go down there, men, you should be going down there to investigate and to smell and to see what you're putting your most precious parts inside of. So I think when you're not worried, I guess that's actually a great definition that I've often used. When you're under someone or you're on top of someone and you're not worried. You're not worried about, am I going to get pregnant? Am I going to get a disease? Are they going to call me in the morning? You're not worried about these things because you know the situation. You've already discussed these things ahead of time. No, you're not going to call me in the morning because I don't ever want to see your ass again. I'm not saying that, or you already know that. You already know that we're protected, that we're not going to contract a disease. Unless you're trying to get pregnant, you already know the other person is also cognizant that we're not trying to get pregnant and we've taken protection against any unwanted sexual consequences. And therefore, we can let our minds go and just get into our bodies and be fully present in the experience. And I think when our brains are moving, and this is a big difference between men and women, as you know, as a psychologist, when our brains are moving, it's very distracting. But the other thing is men, their corpus callosum, which carries their thoughts through their brain, men, it's a very narrow pathway. What I like to describe it as, think of a very, very small town that doesn't even have a mayor. And there's like a one-way road. It doesn't even have street lights. Like there's just a one-way road. So that's a man's brain. It's just very, very focused on a singular thing. And that singular focus combined with male testosterone leads to men often being more open to engaging in sexual experiences than women. Our corpus callosum is very wide. I like to think of it, I'm here in Miami, so I-95, that's our big highway. I'm like, it's I-95 at rush hour, 2 lanes, rush hour traffic going both ways. So if a woman is thinking about, oh my God, are the dishes done? Is my work project done? Or whatever, the kids in bed? Did I do that? Did I order this? If a woman's thinking about those things, it's impossible for her to have really her ultimate sexual experiences. So I often advise men, get those dishes done, hire that sitter, make sure it's not when she has a deadline at work. So I think great sex is when you're not worried at all and when you want to do it again. And I put that there because you don't always have an orgasm during sex, but it doesn't mean you don't want to do it again.
So much, so much. Man, this is just like it is like I'm just sitting at the buffet getting so much. One of the things that comes out of this and what you're saying to me, and something that I've talked about on the show a lot, right? And we don't talk about this a lot about men, but it is still something, this feeling of safety, right? And particularly as you get older, I understand some of the risky things that I did when I was younger. Middle age. But right. But I'll just say I won't talk about anybody else, and I don't like to do that, Doug. But I think for me now, like you said, is like not having the worry, and that worry, not having the worry, is me feeling safe. And I think there are other men. We don't say the word safety in conjunction with masculinity in men a lot, right? We when we tend to think of safety, we talk about women and them feeling safe. I'm gonna step out and say men also need to feel safe, right? And that is something that we just haven't said so much. But I know for me, like in a sexual experience, I don't want to worry. I don't, and there are 10, 12, 20, 1,000 different things that I'm thinking about before the sexual encounter, things that I had never even thought about before having sex these days. And I'm like, oh, wow. And so you are right. I don't want to worry. And so the next thing I'm going to ask you, okay, I don't want to worry. I don't want the women that I'm with, and people don't want the partners that they have to worry. So how do we take the worry out of the sexual experience so people can have great sex?
Okay, shameless plug. I always say the first thing you should do is just listen to my podcast, the Sex and South Beach podcast.
There you go.
It's going to start a conversation you've never had before. The reason I do these podcasts is to stimulate conversations that you would never otherwise have. And even though I'm the one doing the podcast, I could discuss my podcast topics with anybody, and it's going to generate a conversation around sexual fulfillment, sexual health that I otherwise wouldn't be able to have. And it's in a lighthearted, easy to, a very palatable way, the way we're discussing it, not so serious and shaky. And, what I tell younger people is if you can't talk to someone, sometimes it is funny. Are we going to use a condom? Do you have an IUD? I don't know. How are people protecting themselves these days? And not just from the physical harm, but also we don't want to hurt people's feelings. You don't want to have sex with a woman that you think this is a casual relationship and she thinks, oh my God, we're getting married tomorrow. Like, you want to make sure when we talk about safety, I often think about people who are at risk for charges. I have worked with football teams before because foot athletes on college campuses, almost half of all sexual charges, of misconduct are against athletes on a college campus. And so it's very important when an athlete decides to engage in a sexual relationship, whether it's casual or more than that, that they protect themselves and make sure that this person doesn't have any ammunition to bring up charges. And so I think when we talk about safety, there's a lot of areas around that we can also get into, talking about. And of course, now I've gone so far off the tangent, I've forgotten the question you've asked.
How do we not? Look, I felt that.
I'm like, what are we talking about?
No, my question was really around, how do we take the worry out of the sexual experience? Yeah, to have the conversation.
Sometimes. But if you can't have the conversation before sex, then you shouldn't be having sex with that person. It's okay to giggle. It's okay to giggle when you're talking. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to feel embarrassed. And I think that we've really tried to remove the authenticity. We're all so cool, on Instagram and all of our things. And I tell people I'm completely socially awkward. I'm going to say a lot of wrong things. I'm going to mess up a lot. And then they know, look, it's going to be you. So I think that if you can't have the conversation, you probably shouldn't be having sex. If you can't say,
yeah, I think that's the key. And I want my revolutionaries to really think about how their body reacts to somebody that they are potentially going to have sex with or having sex with, and how you feel. And one of the things, Doc, that I have realized in this later stage is to really listen to my body. Does my body want to do this? Right? My mind may have said, hey, this might have been a good thing, but my body will, because I think that's the unconscious part of me saying, did you really want to be here? did you really want to do this? And I think no, you didn't really want to do this. So I'm about to be out. I'm about to go back into the shade, and you're out here on your own now because you made a decision to have sex with someone that you didn't really want to have sex with, and I'm not about to come out and play. So you're on your own now, and you're on your own. And so that's something that really understanding my body and really saying, okay, there's a sense of worry, or I don't feel safe in this sexual experience, and I shouldn't be here in the first place because I've done I hate to say that, I've done some comparison. I won't say a lot of comparison, Doc, but I was like, okay, so I was really, really engaged in this sexual experience. Oh, okay, I was not really, really engaged in this sexual experience, and why? What happened? And it is coming to this realization of I felt safe in one sense and I did not feel safe in the other. And how do you have that conversation, like, well, with yourself and then with your partner, like something's amiss and it's not right. And maybe this isn't the relationship, or maybe this isn't the sexual experience for either one of us. So that I think that's the thing. We want to feel safe. And like you said, if the crux of this, if it's good, you want to do it time and time again. Like I want to be like, hey, you coming through tonight? Hey, let's go to dinner. Let's go for a bike ride. Let's go somewhere, because I know that the mental state that we'll talk about in a second is key, because, you know, as a man, if it's good, you like, I can get greedy. Like I want to keep doing it. Right. I'm just saying. But there are also, right. There are also things that have to happen to make the encounter great for everyone. Like you said, men can be really like focused and like, okay, I'm in, but we also have to realize what our partner's needs are. So what do men do? And we'll talk about this in a heterosexual perspective, because that's where I live. And so I don't want to disrespect anyone. But what do men in a heterosexual space have to do to really, particularly if they're not worried and it's a safe space and they want to do it, how do they make the space amenable and conducive for their partner to want to have sex with them on a regular basis?
Very, very good question. And I hope all of your male listeners are like rooting for you. Like, thank you, bro. I've been trying to ask that question for a long time. So I think the number one rule for men is you must make her, or attempt to motivate an orgasm prior to penetration. And I think it's a misnomer. Like, I don't know why it is, why people don't know this. It's been well published dozens, thousands of times. About 75% of women cannot achieve a climax through penetrative sex alone. Period. There's no, but I'm 7 inches. It doesn't matter. And by the way, all of you 7-inch people, like 93% of all men are 5 inches or less erect. So I know everybody listening is part of the other 5% or 6%, but I know.
Every one of my listeners, right?
Everyone. I know, but erect, I think it's really, really critically important if a man is truly engaged in trying to give pleasure to his female partner. It's extraordinarily important for him to know that a woman is going to have an orgasm so much easier with penetration if she has one before penetration. And there's many different ways to motivate an orgasm in a woman prior to penetration.
Let's talk about this, right? Let's talk about this, right? Because I'm hearing what I'm hearing is that you got to put in the time and effort, right, to stimulate your partner. From a clitoral standpoint is what I'm hearing. We just put in the words. We're defining terms, right? Right. This is an education show. So knowing that going in, 75% of women do not, or may not, we'll say may not have an orgasm through penetration and need stimulation, some other forms of stimulation to help them orgasm.
Exactly. And the key is they don't have it through penetration alone.
Okay.
Alone. So I think, I can't remember, but I want to say that I wrote this book, Sex in South Beach, and in the first chapter, it's like what causes an O in a woman. And I talk about the 1-prong technique, the 2-prong technique, the 3-prong technique. There's different techniques that you can use. But remember, a penis isn't very flexible, right? A penis is a long, hard, like vessel or, tool, so to speak. And I don't want to minimize it by using the word tool at all, but it is not flexible. Whereas our fingers are very flexible. They can do things. Our tongue is very flexible. And the thing about our tongue, one of the organs in our body with the maximum amount of muscles. So we have more like muscles in our tongue than in our arms. There's debates about whether there's muscles in other areas. So I don't want to say it's the organ with the most muscles, because there are some debates. We have them here at the medical school. And also our tongue has amazing endurance. Has your tongue ever been tired? Never, right? You've never been like, man, my tongue is worn out.
My tongue is tired.
You've never said that. I mean, if
maybe my jaw, maybe my jaw, but not my tongue.
No, your tongue doesn't get tired, and you can, your tongue can be firm and pointy, and it can be wide and soft, and we can do a lot of different things with our tongues. And I mean, there's our tongues, there's our fingers, there's toys, there's massages, there's erogenous zones that haven't been discovered. Some people, it's right on the inner side of their elbow, or right where their butt meets the back of their thigh, that crease, right, where the butt and the thigh join. It might be behind the knee. I mean, and that's a great exercise for people to do, is let's discover our erogenous zones, because you know who you're not? You're not my ex-boyfriend. You're not the last man I was with, and that's one thing. So the last thing that turned him on may not be the thing that you want, and vice versa. And it's tragic that I've heard from so many women, that their partner, their male partner, is like, well, that, something's wrong with that. Something's wrong with me because your last girlfriend liked it like that, and your last woman liked it like that. And I'm like, yeah, everybody is absolutely different. Absolutely. Right. And please, like Rihanna said, I want to be the only girl in the world. So it's my body you got to get to know. My likes, my desires, and when you're done with all of that, you're not going to be thinking about any other woman, because, a woman will reciprocate, 1,000 times over. That's simply, I don't want to simplify it and make a stereotype, but it is a female nature to give. We meet you at more than halfway in most instances, especially when we feel safe. Now, that's another issue. Women feeling safe. We need to feel safe to swing from the chandeliers. We might really want to, but we're scared you're going to think we're a whore or something, or that we're too experienced. Or by being able to vocalize our desires, that we, that somehow that doesn't resonate well with your ethics, or you want a Virgin Mary or whatever, there's always that Madonna whore Virgin Mary, dichotomy. But I think that's the most thing men need to learn, is pleasure her. And it might not be clitoral stimulation. It might be nipples, it might be her neck. It might be behind her ears. I have a woman who blames me for getting her pregnant with her third child, because her husband gave her a back massage.
You found it.
Yes, her husband gave her a back massage with a body oil that we sell, that my company sells. So she's like,
thank you.
You're responsible for that baby. I'm like, it was a back massage. So find out what your partner likes and do it for them. And if you can cause her to have a climax, have an orgasm prior to penetration, then she's also going to be much more likely to have multiple orgasms during. That's what
I wanted to. Right. I want to get to that. Yeah. I want to get to that. So I want to plug your book. All right. Sex in South Beach. And to make sure that our listeners go out, if you want to have good sex, if you want to have great sex with your partner, and I'm sure that the book is equitable, and people of all walks of life can learn about their sexuality and their sexual experiences from Sex in South Beach, because I want to make sure that people who listen to the show know that this is a very equitable show. We had the conversation because I come from a cisgender heterosexual man, and that's my experience. But I want to make sure that people who are listening to the show, they can take something away. So please make sure that you're going and purchasing Sex in South Beach by Dr. Sonjia. And I think the takeaway from what you just said is communication and not being able to have, and not being afraid to have the communication that needs to have be prior to your first sexual encounter, and then to have more communication once that first sexual encounter happens about, and typically, my male revolutionaries, it's not asking like in the moment, how was that? What can we change? Cuddle up a little bit, have some intimate time, right? Spend that time. For me at this age, right? Intimacy is so big. Right? It is so big. I've talked about the show. Sometimes it's not just about having sex or not having sex at all. It is the intimacy that happens that will lead to a sexual experience later on. And so how do you create that intimacy? And part of that is through the communication that you have to have with your partner, to make them feel safe. And anyone needs to feel safe. Women needs to feel safe that they can explore and be themselves, and they want to hang from the chandeliers, or they want to have trapeze, or they just want to be, hey, I want to lay on my back and do whatever it is, people need to feel safe. I want to talk about something with you because it comes up, because I've met people who are in the lifestyle, and we'll call it the lifestyle. People who are polyamorous, who are into BDSM, and it is really interesting because I often feel like it's characterized as something that is way out, but I feel like it's making itself more into mainstream conversation, more into mainstream society. How do we have more and more conversations about polyamory and BDSM, or different facets of sex that might pleasure people, without ostracizing them? All right. Because typically what I feel like is these conversations come from men, and that if women talk about them or express this to men, they're like, wait, hold on. So how does that happen in a healthy way? And how can we engage in polyamory or different sexual experiences without the shame, without the stigma, but with enjoyment?
Very, very, very good questions. Again, and this is the last time I'm going to say, listen to that podcast. But the Sex and South Beach podcast, like, we have America's top fetishes. We talk about role playing, and we talk about, and a main reason that I do this show is so people will listen to it with their partner, and then they're now engaged in a conversation, and I've done the hard work of initiating it. Because what you said, it is very challenging to bring up these things, and when's the right time? You definitely don't want to do it during sex. One thing that I do, which probably isn't accessible to everyone, like, I went to a dinner party on Friday night, my girlfriend introduces me, and the first question I'll ask is, I will talk, because I'm back into a writing mode. So I'm writing some things around this concept of marriedish now. And I'm asking people, could you be in a great relationship where everything is great? You guys have similar values, world ideals, your money situation is right, you're both evolving in complementary directions, everything's great, and your partner asks, I don't know if I want to step out and try something else, and I don't know, and if I were to do that I wouldn't want it to limit our relationship, and I don't want to end our relationship in any way, but I think I want to take a look, or I think I want to go to this maybe swingers club, Club Velvet or something. That's one here in Miami. I think, would you come with me, or would you not come with me, depending on what you're getting into? And I think that it's critically important to find a way to have those conversations with your primary partner before you make any behavioral changes. And if you are the person on the receiving end, the first thing you want to not do, you don't want to shut it down. No, don't talk about that with me, because that just means someone's going to do it and hide it from you. And if you're talking about true, genuine intimacy, you really want to know one, for risk and safety. You want to know what your partner's up to, but also all of us want to feel accepted for just who we are. I know I have a lot of imperfections, a lot. Like, I know, but it's got to be okay that sometimes she goes on a tangent and she talks a lot about different things and, merges 12 points into one sentence or something like that. And it's got to be okay that she gets up at 5 a.m. and works out, even though I hate when, she, gets out of the bed and messes it up and it wakes me up. Certain things we all want to feel accepted. Just right. for our good parts and our weaknesses. And I think when we shut people down, one, it creates this culture of secrecy. And I know that we're both you and I work in a predominantly heterosexual space. Although I do a lot of work with the LGBT community. However, most of my work is with the heterosexual population. But I think that we want to know, one, what our partner's up to. And I'm going to try to finish my train of thought because this is my weakness of going into too many directions, but normally it'll come back. And it's also a weakness of this virtual thing. I'm much better live. Just, I never forget what I'm saying in live.
I bet.
That's what this married-ish book is about. But it is how do we engage in these conversations and in these without getting shut down? Because divorce rates are 50% or more, and they're going up and down, but they've always stayed around 50%. That's because marriage was created by monks. The whole thing of marriage was created by sexless monks who never dated anyone. And they're the ones who decided that you could only have sex inside of a marriage or else it's a sin. And somehow they've been very successful in convincing society of that since, the Middle Ages, which is a completely ridiculous thing that the first person you have sex with is also going to be the last person that you have sex with.
Right.
So I think...
I can't even remember the first person I had sex with. Actually, I can't, but...
And see, girls, I hope there's some young women listening. I told you he don't even remember your name. See, I told you.
I won't say your name. I remember exactly where it was.
Sometimes I do bring my male staff.
It was a wonderful experience. We had a great time.
But I do think, how do you bring it up? You can say no, and you can say, I'm going to think about it. But you can't shut your partner down because you do not want to walk in. I say you want to know that your partner is going to bring a man. Like, I'm a woman and I'm a heterosexual woman. I don't know how I would feel if my partner wanted to become intimate with other men. But, I definitely want to listen to what he has to say about it. And I prefer to have that conversation than come home and find my partner with a man at home because he didn't feel that he was in a relationship where he could feel accepted no matter what. And I think as any human being, and I'm a Black woman, so we've felt a lot of repression and secrecy through history. We've been hiding a lot of things through history. From when Black people were trying to pass in order to get right. So I think once we're not really truly liberated to be our full selves until we can have honest and authentic sexual communication. And part of my mission is to make sure that everyone really understands sex is health.
Sex is health. Sex is health. And I think that's wonderful.
Sexuality is part of our health. And many times people end up in the doctors because something's not working sexually. But what it's doing is uncovering an underlying health issue. So I love that you're creating this space where we can have a conversation about sex, but it's really about our health. And if we're repressing things, our mental health is suffering, and we've seen this. And that's where I was going with the heterosexual. I remember with our LGBTQ community, it's very frustrating for me the way minority communities have treated LGBTQ because it's one of the biggest reasons why AIDS transmits so rapidly. And I say AIDS because many minority communities don't get the treatment when they have HIV. And so it's very, very frustrating if you don't know anyone who's gay, and if you don't know anyone who's a swinger, and if you don't know anyone who's into BDSM, and for those who, are still working on their GED, we're talking about, whips and chains and, sex swings and, 50 Shades of Grey.
All of the toys, all of the
toys, tie me up, all of that, blindfold me.
All of that. Yes.
And there's definitely different levels to that. Not every BDSM experience needs a safe word. It
can be a very loving and intimate experience about a communication. So I hear.
Right. So if we can allow people to be open, and starts in many communities by saying like, hey, did you know there's gay people? Period. And just acknowledging what's really going on. And there's men who have sex with men. There's women who have sex with women. There's men who have sex with men and women. Women do the same things. And acknowledging the realities of this, then we can start opening up conversations. And I love what some of our TV shows have been doing in recent years with that. I don't have time to watch a lot of TV, but my medical students always tell me, when there's a good episode on Insecure. There was a man on the show Insecure where one of the women, a heterosexual woman, was dating a man, and he talked about his prior sexual experiences with men. Mm-hmm. And she couldn't be in that relationship anymore.
Yeah, that has been so interesting, and I want to touch on that one really quickly after this, because one of the things that you said, and I want my revolutionaries, particularly my revolutionaries, but everybody needs to, if you're in a relationship with a man, you understand that what Doctor said was sex is health, and understanding this right from time puberty hits, right. Your sexual experience is going to tell you about your health. And as we age, your sexual response cycle, how your body is physiologically responding, right? Thinking about that, particularly if we're thinking about heart health, right? And you've talked about this on some of your YouTube episodes that I've watched, right? Mm-hmm. Heart health. Basically, your penis will let you know how well your heart is working. Right, thinking about this, and I want people to understand that, right? Because the morning wood is a thing, right? It is a thing, and it's really your body letting you know that you are actually functioning well. Your heart is working well. Your cardiovascular system is working well. If your body is not telling you, if you're not having that experience, then it's as Doc said, something may be amiss. It may not be, right? You may not be consciously aware when it happens. Usually it's a nocturnal thing, or typically as you're waking up. Actually, it happens a number of times during the night, and you may or may not know that it happens. And there are actually little tests that you can actually do to see if you're actually having a nocturnal erection. But it's letting you know what your body is doing around your cardiovascular health. And then also thinking about this, your mental health, depression and anxiety have an impact on your physiological response, your sexual response cycle, and thinking about how do you overcome those things, because your body is telling you something's wrong. And I want you to listen to that, revolutionaries, as you're moving through. There was one other piece that I wanted to get to, but it's gone. That's that middle-aged thing that happens. You have a great thought and then it's gone. I want us to move the conversation just a little bit. It brings it back because you said something about men talking about their relationships with men if they're in a heterosexual relationship. And as I prepared for this interview with you, I went and did some focus groups. I went to talk to my revolutionaries, and one of the questions that came up and said, make sure that you ask this question. And this is a brother who's in LGBTQ, right? He was like, how do we create space for men to explore their sexuality without shame? Right? Because, and particularly for Black men, we do that, right? From a cisgender, even from a religious and biblical perspective, Doc, we shame men who do not, conform to the cisgender heterosexual. How do we allow men, particularly Black men, to explore and be able to not worry about their sexual experiences?
Very, very, very good question. I love what Magic Johnson's
all these
son
various,
is doing.
man. I'm getting I feel like I'm getting so many gold stars from
you
these
are.
questions.
You're getting like an A on this quiz, okay? But I love what Magic Johnson's son is doing by being very himself out in the public, and I think finally we're coming to a space in society, in our cultural evolution and social evolution, where people are feeling more liberated to be who they truly are. But I think the way that we really should tackle this, particularly in the Black community, is we have to tackle it through the churches. Just like Black people were not allowed to be married, this is what I tell the Black churches. I go and give lectures in Black churches often. And because God wants everybody to stay together, which means we must have good sex, right? God wants our strong families build strong communities, and good sex builds strong families, can lead to strong families. And that's the perspective I take when I'm going into the church environment. But until our churches make it an environment that's accepting for everyone, people are going to do these behaviors in the closet. And we are finally starting to make some strides with churches where they're starting to say, okay, conversion therapy might not be the way to go. Like, he's gay, we're going to convert him to being straight again. No, that's not going to work. So I think that it has to start really from a spiritually centered for people who believe in God or are actively involved in the church. Many churchgoers I know do have a gay relative, do have a child or a family member or a friend of their family who isn't heterosexual, and they can relate to their experiences because they want to protect the person whom they love. So they understand how hard it is when a Black man comes out as gay. They often lose their family, their community, their church. They're isolated all alone. And whenever someone doesn't have that, they put themselves at risk for a lot of things, because as you said, the depression kicks in and all of these other things that can really fuel some really risky behaviors. So I think that in our families, like at home, when we go home, we have to make sure. I once said to my family, maybe she's gay. I was talking about one of my cousins who had not married, and God forbid she had not married. And, she was 30. So, she might as well just die, right? So I said, well, maybe she's gay. And they came down on me so hard as if I said she was a crackhead. And I said, there's nothing wrong if she's gay. I just thought, look at how's she going to come out as gay to you guys? Look what you guys just did to me. And I just said, maybe she is gay. And so I do think that it's like your show. Who is the revolutionary in your family? Who is the revolutionary in your church? Who's going to go talk to the pastor? And who's going to go talk to the neighborhood association? Who we see this kid at the rec center. He's 14. Sometimes we know someone's gay before they're able to open up and disclose their sexuality to us. And oftentimes we haven't created these spaces. So I think, one step is let's go be the revolutionary in our personal environments and start fueling these changes, motivating some changes where our church environments, our home communities are places that accept all of the members of our family.
Right.
And, I think that's really, really critically important. And I think one way to do it as well is to remember Black people were limited. So now we want to limit the rights of gay people. It's very, very frustrating to me.
It is very frustrating.
So we want to make sure that everybody has the same types of rights. And at the end of the day, no matter who someone's having sex with, when someone's having really, really good sex, when I say that, that means your hormones are on fire. Mm-hmm. They're not worried about everything. They have the dopamine, prolactin, serotonin, everything is just exploding. Oxytocin. They just want to cuddle up and touch you.
Exactly.
When someone's really experienced, it's a very, very healthy thing. Very similar to how someone feels after a really hard workout at the gym. And when if you've ever done a really hard workout at the gym, you're emitting the same hormones, which is why when you leave the gym, you're like, what's up? Yeah, I did that. You never leave and are like, damn, I wish I didn't do that. You're like, this was great. This was really good. So I think this conversation and the things that we're asking your revolutionaries to do is to create these spaces where everybody can enjoy this explosion of good, happy hormones. I call them the happy hormones, which is why when someone walks in the next day after they got some last night and it was really good, they do have a glow. They really are experiencing a positive physiological reaction. Right. You're like,
exactly.
You got some last night, didn't you?
Yeah, you did.
And they're like, don't be all up in my business. Actually, I got to leave early today.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like Jill Scott said, is it the way? You know what I'm saying? Exactly. So I think what we hear is that we have to figure out how do we be allies. You revolutionaries have to figure out how to be an ally for your folks, in particular as Black men as they explore, right? Give the brothers an opportunity to explore who they are, right? And in a sense that it creates a safe space. I think we talk about the themes of communication and safety and not worrying and just allowing people to just be in this world, right? If sex is health, we want everybody to live, right? Think about that.
Absolutely.
We want everybody. Yes, we want everybody to live. It is a part of who we are. Think about, as Doctor said, the oxytocin, the serotonin, the dopamine, the prolactin. You're right, right. All the good things that feeling of euphoria, like this was good. And guess what? I want to do this again. And we don't want this to be in a trauma-filled space, right? Because relationships can be, right, you can have great sex and have a horrible relationship. So we would love for them, and that could be another conversation for us to have. But yeah, how to have yeah, that's my thing. How do you have great sex in a great relationship? I haven't figured that out yet, but that's another conversation. But I want us to feel like, hey, when I wake up or when you go out or after you listen to this conversation, I know how to go out and have great sex because I want to find someone or someone's that I don't have to worry, that I can communicate with about my sexual needs, and that we can explore those things together without shame, and that we feel some kind of way. And I think what happens, particularly, and this is my hypothesis, Doc, is that when we go out and explore, we're missing something in a sexual relationship, right? And men typically, interestingly enough, the research around men and infidelity is higher. But it's not as the disparity between men and women in infidelity is not as great as we think it is, right? Women also actually commit infidelity at a larger clip than we think. So something's missing, but oftentimes the research says that there's an emotional aspect. So men in a heterosexual relationship or whatever, you need to figure out how you're not meeting your partner's emotional needs, because emotions, for at least from my hypothesis, emotions lead to, well, I'm emotionally secure over here, I'm going to allow my physical secureness to go along with this as well. And so understanding that, Doc, I know we could talk for hours, and I had many more questions, right? Many more questions for you, and maybe there's a part 2 to this conversation. But one of the last things that I want to ask you, because my revolutionaries are always like, there are practical things that I need. I want to have great sex tonight, as we said earlier. So what are 3 or 4 steps that people can take charge or enhance their sexual experience right tonight? Now that you would get tonight, today, this week, right?
Now. They're going to
right now.
They're already getting undressed. They're about to do it now.
Right, exactly. Like I'm listening, like I'm unbuttoning my shirt. Like what can I take from Dr. Sonjia?
Well, I love to say, like, my home-based kit for stimulating some great sex tonight is if you have altoids or a similar type mint, the same thing it does in your tongue, it also can do on our sexual organs. Now, be warned. I've had clients who did the wrong thing and not 14 altoids, a fourth of one. Start with 1/4 of one. You got to cut it or bite it, right? So I love the altoids, especially if you're going to be doing some oral stimulation. It's just a new, exciting thing and if you have a mint at home, it's something that can be easily done. Another great, easy, fun thing to do is ice. Crush up some ice in a bucket. I say crush it up first because you don't want a big old ice cube in your mouth. You're at bed. You're like, I got to cut it. I got to get it down to size to make it. You want a small little shaved, a piece of ice that's big enough to make an impact, but not big enough that you can't move your mouth. And you can play with the hot and cold sensations with someone when you're stimulating someone, either through massage or through, if you're massaging, their sexual organs with your mouth, through oral stimulation. But if you have a nice piece of ice in your mouth, and ice does melt, which is why I recommend a bowl of crushed ice, a bowl of pre-crushed ice is by the bed, because you can't use that bourbon
ice cube, a little too big.
No, and you don't want any big ice cubes. And another great one is, champagne. And if you're not drinking apple cider, pop a bottle of bubbly. This is particularly good for women who are getting ready to perform fellatio on their man. Especially for women who don't like to perform fellatio. This is what I say, put something in your mouth that has some sparkle in it, and you can hold that in your mouth while you're holding your man in your mouth. And it's just another way of stimulation. You can then drink it. You can fill your mouth up with more. So there's different ways that you can get over your reluctance to perform fellatio. And it offers another level of stimulation for your partner. And if anyone's into TikTok, which everyone except me seems to be,
I'm not a TikToker.
Neither am I. But I did have to do an episode on the TikTok vaginal melts because I had so many medical students asking about it. And I didn't know that it was this phenomenon.
TikTok. Wait, you got to give up the 1 minute synopsis of that. What is a TikTok vaginal melt?
Well, they're vaginal melts. I guess they're heavily advertised on TikToks, but they are a form of a lubricant. So doctors can give you, a suppository and a lubricant, in it looks like a little small bean. I'm trying to think of a shape, like maybe the size of a piece of popcorn that a woman can put inside of her, particularly if she's, maybe a breast cancer survivor or an ovarian cancer survivor, or a transgender female, someone who needs additional lubrication. So these vaginal melts that are being advertised on TikTok are the same principle, except they're flavored like watermelon, like chocolate covered cherries. Like, I remember telling one guy, I was doing this interview with somebody, he's like, why would someone want to taste that during sex? I'm like, apparently this is a phenomenon. Some people want to taste cotton candy instead of their woman. But that's another thing that might be a fun trick if you have some tonight, because apparently these are hot sellers. So a lot of people do have them in their house. So to add a little flavor, especially for ladies who might want to encourage their men to do a little something other than penetration, to make sure that you're maximizing your opportunities for multiple orgasms tonight.
Multiple orgasms. Yes. Multiple orgasms. And that is a whole nother conversation. We've definitely got to have a part 2, because I want to have
the taint. If you're going to do it tonight, don't forget the taint. There, that's it. That space right between that space right between your front and back organs. That special sweet spot is generally sensitive for almost every adult. Just about every adult, there's some sensitivity there. So a little light stimulation there, a little light petting, maybe some light licking, a little light stimulation there might be something to wake up your love life on a Tuesday night.
There you go. On a Tuesday night. Look, revolutionaries, this is going to go down as one of those conversations, one of those educational, fun, right? Enjoyable, and for the people who are watching, you get to see Dr. Sonjia and like this amazing educator, sex educator, researcher who gets up at 5 a.m. in the morning. So you can see that she's pretty fit. And so she's fit mentally, physically, and she is America's sex educator. So she is also sexually adept in giving the information. I won't talk about her prowess.
You said you weren't going to tell anybody. I thought it was just between us.
I did not. I will not tell any more. I know. I won't tell anymore. I won't. I'm sorry. Like, thank you. That's all I got to say. Thank you. I wasn't worried. So I wasn't worried. So thank you. It was wonderful and it was safe. I really hope your partners are going to listen to this. So, revolutionaries, this is an opportunity as we think about who we are and who we want to be, right? The critical takeaway from this is I want us to know that sex is health, right? And we shouldn't feel like talking about sex is a taboo thing, right? Dr. Sonjia Kenya has made her mark in the world. Her revolution is really educating us around how do we have great sex? And with great sex, we lead a more healthy life. Because as we said earlier in the show, great sex will make you want to stay home. And staying home, hopefully, is a very safe place for you. And thinking about what that looks like. That's the revolution, right? Having the conversation, communicating, having the most robust sex of your life will lead to hopefully greater sexual outcomes. And having a partner or partners, right, that you feel safe, that you can explore with will allow you to have a greater, more explicit, right, experience in life and hopefully greater health. So, Dr. Sonjia, I am so happy. I'm looking forward to the next conversation because we didn't talk about toys. We didn't talk about multiple orgasms. We didn't talk. There's, how do we break toxic cycles of dating in a sexual relationship? Because some of us end up in toxic relationships because of the sex. So all the things. So I know that we will have a chance to talk again. I look forward to being on your show as well. Please go and check out Dr. Sonjia Kenya, Sonjia Keya, America's Sex Educator. Her podcast and book are of the same name, Sex in South Beach, if I'm correct. So make sure there you go, Sex in South Beach. And if you're ever in Miami, you want to have a conversation about sex, please go see her. Revolutionaries, I love you. It is a wonderful time. Thank you, New Orleans, for giving me space to be who I am, to love, to revel, to see my boys, to see my people, to see my friends. I love you. I'll see you next time. Revolutionaries, always be able to answer what we think here is the most thought-provoking question of your life. What's a revolution? We'll talk to you soon. Peace.